Thanks for tuning into this episode. My name is Ellis Tucci. I'm the managing editor at Orbit MI.
And I'm Ryan Dooley, Chief Commercial Officer, and we are joined by...
Hey, I'm Eric Cavoli. I'm the creative director and partner at CashmanKatz, and you are listening to Ship Talk.
Nicely done. See, and that's why he's a pro, Ellis. That's why he's a pro.
That's why we had him on.
We have in advertising, we have a thing, when we're presenting TV spots or radio spots to a client before they're produced, we do scratch tracks, right, which you're probably familiar with. And so I always insert myself into the VO for scratch tracks, and
I love it.
It's sort of like a second career there. And then I hear a professional do it, and I realize that it'll never be a first career, right?
I love it. Well, I think this is I believe this is our inaugural episode where we actually have someone that's not Ellis and I.
It is
chatting. So we want to give you the warmest of welcomes here. And I think we're starting off strong, man. I think we're setting the bar really high for ourselves here by leading off with Eric. So I feel very good about it, though.
If that's the case, I don't have really high hopes for your podcast, but do the best I can.
Beautiful. So, what brings us here? What brings us here today to chat with Eric? There is that Eric's and team over at CashmanKatz have been working with the Orbit MI team, helping us out in a number of different content creation efforts there from the marketing side. And one of the curiosities I know I had directly, and it came up in a meeting, is saying it would be great to speak to a professional and understand what the process is about developing a brand and understanding how you approach this business. With that being said, Ellis and I jotted down some questions, and we want to just pick your brain about it and kind of dig in. And with that, I'll kind of kick it over to Ellis there to kind of ramp us up and get us moving in the right direction here.
Oh, well, thank you, Ryan. So to kind of kick off our first question, Eric, if you could just kind of talk about who CK is as an agency, what are the kind of things that you're involved with, that kind of area.
Sure. So, I guess, CashmanKatz is you can call us an advertising agency, a communications company. These descriptors have changed through the years. Sometimes we call ourselves an integrated communications firm, but, most familiar term is probably advertising or branding agency. And we do everything from, more traditional advertising to actually doing rebrands and branding projects for companies. And we're a smaller company, but we work with some larger brands. And I think one of the coolest things is we work with really no specific type of brand, large, small, B2B, B2C, consumer, industrial, all across the boards. And everything from one of the most prominent consumer products in everyone's medicine cabinet to the pizza place down the road, and it's fun for us to have that kind of a ride, what we do.
That's cool. Can I kind of a weird one-off question? This isn't. We have a handful of real hard-hitting ones that I think are hard-hitting because they're about who is CK and what do you guys do? Random one-off here. What is the best practice within the? I want to use your vernacular correctly, and I really like the name you just said. How did you phrase it? Integrated communications. What was that one? Can you repeat that one for me?
Integrated communications, or integrated communications company. It's
beautiful. So if for someone who's in this integrated communications, and I flocked that one just because you guys are way more than just advertising. We've had numerous conversations with your team talking about everything from general content generation, strategic stuff, the actual physical advertisement of getting the message out there. So I think your integrated communications company, I think that probably says it all right there. When you're talking about this, you very deftly said it's like a product that everybody knows in your medicine cabinet. Are you under full NDAs where you guys may be doing a ton of work for a company, but the goal is that nobody knows it's not necessarily that company that's doing that work? Is your job to be holding ninja-like and behind the scenes, or if you could just give me a little color there?
It's a great question that no one has ever asked me before. So,
breaking news, folks.
So you know what? It's not a big secret what our type of company does, right? This is what we do, and it's no secret that the biggest brands in the world, even the smallest brands in the world, hire other people to do things for them, right? So there is no, there are NDAs. There are some companies that don't want you to talk about your relationship, but those are not super common. you know.
Sure.
So it's very, you know, we have, when we promote ourselves, for instance, it's very common for us to say we work with X, Y, and Z, and this is the work we've done for them. You know, that's how we win business. That's how we show off what we're capable of. That's how we attract and recruit talent who want to come and work on a specific account. So there's very little mystery there, except when a client specifically says, "Hey, don't mention our name," you know.
Awesome.
And we have had that situation with certain defense industry. There's been some that just, we don't want any kind of presence anywhere other than where we make it ourselves, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So that actually dovetails a little bit into my first question, my first legitimate question that I have here for you, is that so you guys are operating in a slew of sectors.
Right.
Off the top, yay or nay on the first one here, is maritime, because that's Orbit's area. I mean, we're a software as a service company, you know, by trade. However, we are very specific in the niche that we operate in within the maritime sector. Is maritime a new area for your agency?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, we had zero maritime experience in our agency, right?
Oh, okay.
Or however long ago our relationship started, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think of anything even remotely close, and I don't think we worked certainly in shipping in
Okay.
any way, shape, or form before that. And very common practice for us to do that, to start working in a industry that we've never have before. I think that's kind of what makes our work very rewarding and interesting and fun, is to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to imagine the cookie cutter. Cookie cutter is probably the wrong word for it, but if you're only operating in the same space over and over again, you're probably going to go to the, you know, pardon me for my I'm a baseball guy, so I go to a lot of, you'll notice a trend of baseball analogies, folks, for anybody listening at home. But you're going to go to the pitch that you rely on if it's going to be a similar industry over and over again. So I'd imagine this not only being fun and rewarding for you, also makes it tremendously challenging because you're looking at everything through a new set of eyes almost. Would you agree with that, or do you think there's a lot of similarity between the industries?
Well, there's constant and there's similarities in what we're doing for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is discovering truths and articulating what people stand for and what they do. You know, that's the processes we go through for those things are the same no matter what the industry is. But we absolutely have to learn, right? So, you know, we went through and probably still do growing pains with this industry of something as simple as that's not a tanker, CashmanKatz, that's a natural gas ship, or that's a, you know, dry bulk or something like that. So there's just a learning curve for sure. And you know, our goal is to get over that as quickly as possible. But I just think it's fascinating to learn new industries. Now, here's an interesting thing about it. We are deeply steeped in digital transformation software companies. That's nothing new to us. One of our largest clients is a global leader in digital transformation. So these concepts that are very present in Orbit's business are certainly we're not unfamiliar to us. Right?
And Ellis, I know I was joking around when I said his lead in there was something that is the tee up of all tee ups there for me to go ahead and just take the opportunity to plug Orbit, because at our core, as I said, we're a software as a service company. We have a niche in the maritime, but the number one thing that we're driving is actually a full-blown wholesale industry revolution all around digitalization. So what you're talking about there, I mean, that puts you squarely within the wheelhouse of what we're trying to accomplish, which makes it very natural for us to want to work with your integrated communication company. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And kind of following up on that, you know, we've talked about this previously, but Maritime has not been the most maybe aggressive in adopting these new digital strategies. Does that impact the ways that you come up with branding strategies in this sector?
I think it does in a couple ways. One is to understand the mindset of the people that we're talking to, right? And there is while there's certainly a progressive movement present, there is definitely deep-seated, what's the word I'm looking for? There's definitely a sense of old school right? And
that is a fair statement.
slow to ships that are slow to turn, right? All that perfect metaphor for your industry, right? But we need, one of the earliest things we need to understand is you're talking to people that are often generational in this business, that have done things the same way for a long time, that are used to literally to paper and pen and clipboards and things like that. And so in a lot of ways, different from other industries, they may be slower to adopt. So one way it affects is we have to understand that mindset, and the way we articulate who Orbit is and what Orbit can do has to keep that in mind. Everything from some of the specific language we use to, maybe taking baby steps in certain areas, right? And that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but and secondly, the way we execute, right? Using mediums that are comfortable and familiar to this group. And the truth of the matter is pretty much everybody's on social media and in the digital world. So it's not very difficult. We're not running print ads and ship news today or anything like that. But that's also part of the consideration, that we have to understand where they're consuming. And if they're consuming a different type of media than more progressive industries, then, you have to follow suit. So.
Excellent. And pardon me if I'm a little bit dense on this, but kind of getting just an added piece of clarity for my own for my own education here. Like we're saying, trying to make sure that you're operating within these mediums. Is there anything beyond social that you find that the industry lends itself to, or specifically doesn't lend itself to? Meaning, is there anything that they just out and out seem to reject and say, we don't know about that, so we ain't going to do it?
Well, although a great deal of your audience is in offices on land, a lot of your audience is not in one place, right? So digital and social becomes very natural for them because they're not looking at billboards and listening to terrestrial radio and things like that. So, there's some very obvious, mediums that just don't fly, and then for a number of other reasons, such as this being so B2B oriented. But
I was gonna say, should we be exploring possibly audio ads that we send out over like the over the long range radio that they still have on the bridge, like in between NPR newscasts? We also mentioned, we're like, and by the way, Orbit MI, we're the guys to see.
Well, it's an area we haven't explored, but you joke a little bit, but is there digital radio that is popular, with this group, like the Spotify's and Pandoras of the world and things like that, and those are certainly viable mediums to communicate on and highly targetable. But it just feels, because of what you're selling, because of what you do, that living in digital and social makes the most sense, right?
Absolutely.
So
I find my own personal background here, coming up in the maritime industry, on the operational side, working for the shipping lines, etc. I come with a unique background compared to most people that are in the technology and the software space. And one of the things that I find to be useful for me is my ability to take into account how little I knew about most of the technology and most of the mediums that were available to office going people that have spent the last 20 years and seen the full digital conversion over from typewriters to computers into all the many, many facets that we have now. And being able to keep that in mind has been very helpful for me as a sales guy, going out trying to explain to my counterparts, being like, no, don't be afraid of this. It'll help, I swear to God.
Yeah.
With that in mind, and it's actually one of the other key questions that I'm dying to know the answer to this one, is that where does CK start with that? Okay, so keeping all of the things that we've talked about in mind, what is the beginning of the creative process for you? When you're coming to somebody, not in Orbit MI, you get someone else that says, hey, we're also in maritime technology. Where do you begin? What's step one?
Well, I mean, the broader step one is, we believe strongly that everything starts with the idea. And before you start executing anything, you need a really great idea. So the more specific step one is what it takes to start creating that idea, which is knowing everything you can know. So research is always the beginning, and research can take a zillion different forms. It can be just kind of hanging out with your new partners and learning all you can about them. It can be formal research,
Mhm.
like online research or polling or qualitative, quantitative research, all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
But the key is to learn everything you can, um, and that will, in turn, feed your ideation, right? So we spend an awful lot of time in this agency, and not all agencies do. We certainly do. We spend the bulk of our time ideating, right?
Okay.
And if we ever have an assignment from somebody and says, "Hey, come up with a campaign for product X," and
Mhm.
you have 4 weeks to do it, we'll spend 3 weeks and 6 days ideating, right up to the last minute, and then the last day putting the presentation together, right? Because we want to use as much time as possible to think, ideate,
Absolutely.
throw ideas against the wall. So um, it doesn't matter what the industry is, what the end result is, what the campaign is, what the goal is, what the objective is. It's all got to have a really strong idea. And
Mhm.
it's a bit cliche to say that, but not everybody lives by that, especially now as marketing has
Sure.
changed so much. The idea has died a little bit, in some
Yeah.
ways.
Mhm.
It's an interesting it's an interesting thought there about the using your the X amount of weeks plus 6 days, and then on the last day you kind of like we took as much time.
Yeah.
If I've seen, and I can't speak specifically to the integrated communications companies. That's a that's a mouthful for me sometimes. Uh, it's interesting because there's a lot of push to that rapid prototyping model, like people thinking along the lines of like, well, just generate something and get it out, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks, and then come back. Do you do you find pressure to ever shift to that direction, or do you ever run into customers that are asking specifically for something along those lines, so you push your methodology, or do you not find that that's even in the mix?
Yeah, it's a good question. We live in this world of the impossible task of being creative on a deadline. So it's ridiculous, right? These two things shouldn't coexist, but they do. That's the
That's so spot on. Has
every
anyone ever told you, be funny? Tell me something funny right now. It's the least funny you'll ever be if someone
yeah.
tells you, yes, Eric, you're speaking the truth on this one, my man.
And there's a great video that is probably 10 years old now, where they did an experiment and they gave a bunch of kindergartners a piece of paper, and it had a circle on it and a line that looked like a hand of a clock. Two lines that
Mhm.
looked like hands of a clock. And they gave it to the kids and they said, "Okay, you have 1 minute, draw a picture." And the kids all came back and drew clocks,
Makes
right?
sense. Yep.
They did the same thing with another group, same picture. And they said, "Okay, you have 30 minutes, draw a picture." And the kids came back with these marvelously creative, whimsical drawings of animals and owls and trucks and machinery and unicorns and rainbows, right? Because
Yeah.
they had the time to think, and it's kind of a rudimentary example, but it sums it up. But
Absolutely.
alas, we understand we're in a business and there are deadlines, and we have to do that, and that's what we get paid to do, right? To be creative
Mhm.
on a timeline. So.
That is great. Oh, I like that as I like that as a tagline, just in general for a for a company to say it's like we are creative on a timeline. I like that. I like the liner on that.
There's also, that sort of, the way things are changing. Digital is a great example on social media. Um, I had this conversation the other day with one of our digital guys, and we were looking at a couple pieces of creative, and I said, "What do you think is going to work better, this version A or version B?" He's like, "That's true. We'll run them both. Whichever one performs better is the winner, right?"
Yeah.
Mhm.
Really? You don't do that with a full page ad in the New York Times or with a TV campaign, right? But these mediums allow us to do those things, which you have to learn that things are a little different now than they were 20 years ago,
That's
when
great.
every ad was labored over,
Well,
until it was perfect.
I guess it's one of those where you have a finite amount of space in the New York Times, and you have an infinite amount of space on the internet, so you can kind of do what you need to do and see what works.
And you can change it. You don't have a month lead time to get something printed, and it lives in circulation forever. It's here, it's gone,
Beautiful,
or try
beautiful.
something different.
Ellis, what do you got, man? I'm talking Eric's ear off just because I'm intrigued here. So, but please, Ellis, what do you got, bud?
Well, I was just going to say, going off of that, talking about the actual deployment of the campaigns and switching from the beginning of the campaign to the end of the campaign. Do you guys have any, what is your preferred way of measuring success? Like, do you have a preferred set of KPIs that you use or anything similar?
Yeah, so I'll caveat this by saying I'm answering as the creative director, not as the director of analytics. But there's with social and digital become the most amazing, readily available, accurate analytic tools ever developed in advertising, right? So right away what's your criteria, and sometimes you set it ahead of time, sometimes you're looking for a little bit of everything, but is it clicks, is it shares, is it engagement, is it likes, is it follows, is it click through here to this button and then purchase? You can measure anything and everything. So depending on what your particular campaign is, you really establish what desired action you want, and you run your campaign and you say, did it happen? And right down to the single click if it worked or not, right? And it's pretty amazing that we can do that. Other things are a little trickier to measure, but it's done less. But you can do pre and post sort of qualitative studies about recall of advertising or opinions of a brand or something like that. That's done a lot less and less these days, but it used to be a common thing.
On that point there about the metrics and the measurements. So you guys sit in a unique position where you're doing this day in, day out. You have a variety of different campaigns with a variety of different interests. Areas of interest. I would imagine that you guys, just by the nature of your business, are sitting on top of a lot of best practices, so to speak, where you guys have seen what does actually work for these companies. Now, it sounds to me like being able to make recommendations like that falls a little bit closer to maybe management consulting than necessarily just exclusively like marketing and the integrated communications pieces that we're talking about here. But is that a role that CK ever takes on, where you make recommendations saying, someone comes to you and says, we're just interested in shares, and you're saying someone in your business might actually be more focused on click through? Is that a conversation that you guys take on?
Yeah, and I would say more often than not, we take on that conversation, right? Yeah, sure. There are other projects where, hey, we just want to get a bunch of build up our followers on Instagram, whatever, or something. But more often than not, people come to us with a business challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have this new product. We need people to, start learning about it. We need to sell, we need to sell a certain amount or whatever. So it starts with a business challenge, and though we can't solve every business challenge completely, we do our part in the marketing end, right? So we'll create the campaign to achieve that business challenge, whether that's a sales challenge or an organizational challenge or a awareness challenge or something like that, right? So definitely a lot of what we're doing is very strategic, higher level. That's why some of our better relationships is the ones that we're very close with our clients and have a very sort of trusted partnership, and it's rarely, hey, agency, just come back and tell us exactly what to do. It's usually a team, or we'll work with the brand manager or the marketing manager to help make that stuff happen, right?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, that sounds like the right formula will be to make sure that everybody's involved in the process so that you're finding the right solution for it. Makes perfect sense. What do you guys look at though for the long term? Like, it strikes me as saying, the best case financially scenario for CK is you want to keep working. You want to keep working with people that you can be successful with, and everybody makes money, and that's great. Is that your ultimate goal, is to have these long-term engagements where you have just open-ended, you guys are just working together to build this? Or do you guys shoot to try and do something more along the lines of, we want to get you guys up and running so you can do it without us, and you guys go off into the jungle to go find more business there? What's the long term look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's rarely planned that, hey, we'll get you set up and then take off. And I don't think that's completely realistic, because one of the things that we provide that we think is unique and not a commodity is the ideation part, right? So
Yeah.
yes, there are certain things that we help can help our clients grow and become more capable in certain areas. I particularly think about things like social media, and where you can create ideas and templates that your client can run with and often can execute themselves more efficiently than you can as a third party. But ideation is not something that our clients can typically do on their own. That's why they come to us. They're good at what they do. Mm-hmm. So and a lot of the other stuff, buying digital media is a discipline that there's tons of tools that can help you do it, but to do it insightfully and to do it strategically is a discipline. And that's something that we have people here that are really good at, and that's not always something that you can pass on to somebody else who's got 1,000 other duties to do. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I will say though is that the typical agency relationship, retainer relationship, where you were the agency of record for a client and you did all their work, you did everything for them for years, and you had annual contracts or 10-year contracts, whatever. Mm-hmm. Really, those are fewer and far between these days. We do a lot of project work, right, or campaign work, where a client will come to us and say, "Hey, we want us to help you. We want you to help us with our brand, or we want you to help us launch this product." And sometimes they're just short engagements, and here's the project, it's done, and we move on to something else. Sometimes they turn into future projects, but I would say that more of our clients are of that nature, where they're regular clients. We see them every year, but we're doing one project at a time, not really their entire marketing world.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's changed a lot from the way it used to be.
Well, it sounds like it. And actually, so before we move on to another one that's very macro, CK centric, can we dive into the Eric of things for a moment there? I'm just curious, can you give us the quick flavor on your background? Like, how do you end up as the creative director for CK? Like, how do you end up in your role here at CK?
Yeah, well, I came up through the copywriting side of it. So traditionally, creatives are kind of either writers or designers, right? And they come up the copy and art. I came up on the copy side, so I was always a strong writer in school, and always had my teachers and professors say, "Oh, you should be a writer. You should be a writer." So I was looking at all the good writing jobs out there. I said, "Okay, what can I do where I'm a writer?" They say I'm good at that. And there was journalism, but boy, that looked like a lot of work. And I had to go to airports on Christmas Eve, and interview people. It sounded like a drag. So poetry didn't really pay that well. Greeting cards I thought was cool, but it was really only so
Hallmark was knocking on your door.
Yeah, Kentucky, so there's like one game in town, Monopoly. So no, honestly, so the funny thing that happened though, I went to college, and knowing I want to do something with writing, and the year that I had to make my decision what the major was, the college actually introduced an advertising major. So there's a little serendipity there, and I pursued that, interned at a couple agencies, and just worked as a copywriter. And I had a smaller agency that I was a partner in, and CashmanKatz actually bought us about 10 years ago. Bought our clients, our computers, our everything. And so I've been here ever since, as the creative director for the last maybe 6 or 7 years.
That's awesome. I love it. I love these. There's something, I don't know what it is, but there's just something, call it what you want, just sexy about the idea of going into like marketing. You come at shows like Mad Men and just random shows that have really like make it look just like, this is cool. We're gonna grab a glass of scotch and we're gonna come in here and we're gonna find a way for people to make millions. And that just sounds like a cool way to make a living. So yeah, I love that.
It's funny, I talk about I'm a writer, and Ellis, I know you're a writer, right? You've probably written some very substantial things in your life. I'm writing headlines on a cocktail napkin, right? Can I call myself a writer? I'm not sure, but
is there this has nothing to do with CK or even the Maritime. Is there a future for someone in the copywriting field to be like a ghostwriter for tweets? Like you can do, like I can do the best 140 characters that anyone's ever seen type of thing,
Yeah. Well, that's what we do, right? That's what we tweet for our clients, right? We write their Facebook posts, and
I love it. I think that's exactly what I need. I've never been able to embrace Twitter, largely because I can't. going back to your point, circling back to your underlying thing is being creative on a deadline. I can think of,
Right.
I'm widely told by my friends, you're a funny guy. Right up until I'm sitting there with the phone in my hand and being like, I'm going to say something funny right now. And all of a sudden I'm like, the weather today is 67 and sunny. You know, it's just.
Yeah, if you
Well,
miss your
okay.
window with Twitter, it's not doesn't have the same effect.
Indeed. Oh, well, Ellis, I think we have one last outstanding question. You want to bring us home, sir?
Yeah, we've got for one last question. So, what, Eric, would you say to someone who works in maritime but is maybe unfamiliar with the benefits of the type of branding and services that CK provides? And a little caveat onto that, what would be the first steps for that person if they were interested in pursuing that route?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, what branding is not something magical where we come and conjure something or create something new. What we do is we discover really the essence of companies and then articulate that to their audiences. So I would say if there's a company out there in any space, but certainly in maritime, that is trying to communicate with people from a marketing standpoint and is struggling to, or just doesn't, or feels they could do it better, well, that's what we do. We help you do that better, right? And better means more accurately, but also more meaningfully to these audiences. So what you have to say about your product or your service really connects with that audience member in a way that motivates them to do what you want them to do, to like you, to patronize you, to be your friend, to be your partner, you know? So I think there are very few companies out there that say, yeah, we're doing it all right. We're communicating perfectly, you know? And so I would really say the first place to start with that is to really take a look at your brand and what you're all about. And if you're not positive what your essence is, and you're not positive if you're expressing it right, you probably need some help. And a third party coming in is the party to do that. So, and how to go about it is reach out to a great branding agency like CashmanKatz, if you will, and say, hey, we need help. And, we take over from there.
I think
Awesome.
that's the perfect way to phrase it there. And it's interesting. There's a lot of alignment between marketing and sales, and sales and marketing, as our CMO David Levy and I chat about extensively. Is there's so much overlap there, and I think one of the reasons why is because the sentiment ends up being the same. Is that your goal is not it's not the old school image of what a salesperson is, of like selling a used car or anything, trying to get you to buy something that you maybe don't necessarily need or don't necessarily want. The goal in sales today, the consumer is so informed that our goal is to identify who is the right person to buy this and who's the wrong person. And if you're talking to the wrong person to buy this, to move on, so you save yourself some time, you save them some time, and you're respectful to everybody's time, and just basically the fact that they have the knowledge to be able to go Google these things and figure it out themselves. So being able to be likable, personable, create a narrative around this and really say what it is you do and target the right people. From my side, when I look at what CashmanKatz does for us, that's one of the huge wins that we get, is we're able to target the right people with the right message, so that we can very clearly and succinctly tell them what we really want them to know about us, because we know our differentiators better than everyone. We know what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. So I wholly support it. And I feel no shame in saying, if you're looking for a solid branding partner and a solid integrated communications company there, that I wholly stand behind CK. So I think we should shamelessly plug that here as part of our podcast.
You should, yes, it's shamelessly, yes. But the thing is too, we never really defined it, but another good thing for people to understand is what is a brand, right? And people have different definitions of what a brand is, and we know it's far more than just your visual identity, your logo, or anything like that. There's a lot of definitions. The one that I like the most, because I think it helps people understand it, is a brand. Your brand is the promise of an experience, right? And there's two important things there. Is that your brand is an experience for people in some way, shape, or form, and the word promise is really important. So your brand really is out there even before you talk to them, and it's promising something to that audience about you, right? And you think about popular brands like Corona, right? The promise of Corona is that you're going to feel like you're sitting on the beach.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
promise
Yeah.
of Nike is you're going to feel empowered. That's your
Mhm.
promise, you know. So think about your own brand. What's the promise that your brand is making?
Yeah.
You know, what is Orbit MI's promise that they're making to you? You know, and that's it's that definition has always been my go-to because I think it's really clear and it helps people understand the importance of a brand and what it can do for you.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, I think in my academic background, and I stress the academic piece because I don't have enough of the practical application to say, like in my experience, I felt, but from my academic learning is that the brand awareness and brand equity and all these kind of fanciful is the wrong word, fancy terms is the word I'm looking for, of saying that people are going to know who you are and what you're about before you ever speak with them. It ties exactly into what you're saying there. And
Absolutely.
I know you mentioned it rhetorically, but I will just answer your question very quickly, is that, our promise is that we will be the single source of truth for you and a way of consolidating disparate information into one place here with Orbit. So in case anyone was curious, I'm just want to make sure that we're staying on brand, if I may.
That's good. I thought you were going to ask me what Orbit's brand was, and I think I'm glad you didn't because you just did a better job than I was going to do. Right? I was going to say the same thing.
But I didn't want to throw you to the wolves. I didn't want to do it. Because I feel like if I did it wrong, everyone would be like, "Well, that's just Ryan."
Ellis? What do you think? Have you ever thought about it? What the promise of the experience of Orbit?
I've definitely thought about it being in the marketing department, managing all the copy and that, but I don't know if I could upstage the kind of succinctness and accuracy of Ryan's version. So let's defer to his judgment on this.
But now I'm curious, Eric. Did you have one? Did you have one loaded? Did you have one in the holster there as to what CashmanKatz would say is the promise of Orbit?
I think that I would layer in a little more emotion, right? So the strongest brands have this strong emotional quotient to them,
Okay.
right? And I think the emotional part of your brand is a sense of control, right, over the uncontrollable. So I always feel like a single source of truth and is great stuff, but for me, the Orbit brand's always been about a feeling of empowerment and control that I can get my arms around something that just seems so incredibly complex, right? And whether that's data or my business or the changing world or regulations or whatever it is, Orbit helps me do that, And I always thought that was kind of cool with the name Orbit. And I know you don't really go heavily on this, but bringing all this into my own orbit, you know what I mean? So I get it. So it all makes sense to me. There's something emotional about that. I think that's an important part of your brand.
I am not too proud to say that is the better of the two promises, my friend. So I got to tell you, I'm going to spend the rest of my afternoon putting that into my. So I'm a huge proponent of take a good message that you hear from someone, whether it be sales, marketing, etc. But you got to put it in your own voice. Like if I try to say something
Sure.
that Ellis says, I can't make it sound the way he says. Same thing with you, Eric. I'm going to spend the whole rest of the afternoon trying to recreate exactly what you just said in the Ryan Dooley voice here, because that, my friend, spot on. I love that.
All right. Very cool.
With that, there, Mr. Ellis, any other last minute rating questions there that we want to make sure that we we get Eric with before we let him go?
That I think pretty much wraps it up on the questions front. Eric, thanks so much for coming on. Can you let our listeners know where they can find out more about CashmanKatz?
Great. Yeah. So you can check us out at CashmanKatz.com. That's Cashman, KATZ.com. And like most agencies, we're working on our own website slowly because we have lots of other clients. So our website's a work in progress, but but you can learn about there and contact us and give us a shout if you have any questions or just want to talk to somebody about branding.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for the time there, Eric, and for all of our listeners. And hopefully we'll end up bringing in a whole new slew of listeners here with this one that didn't catch our first episode. But for anyone that wants to see the work, it's out there on our YouTube channel. So come into www.orbit.com and go into our YouTube channel. You'll be able to check out a ton of videos and a ton of different content that's been largely influenced and assisted in design by the good folks at CK. So we are very much appreciative to it, and we look forward to working with you ongoing, my friend, for the foreseeable future. CashmanKatz is a large part of our strategy.
Well, thank you guys. It's been great. Let's do this every week.
Yeah.
Sold, my man.
Yeah.
We'll bring you in, and I'd love to get your input on each one of the branding exercises we do for each podcast, so we could just have Eric swing in for 5 minutes at the end and say, "And this is how it's going to get done, guys."
Yeah.
I love it. Fantastic. Well, I think, folks, that'll do it for us here. And once again, thank you for listening. This has been Ryan Dooley.
This is Ellis Tucci.
And I've been Eric Cavoli at Ship Talk. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, then consider subscribing or sharing with a colleague.